Today we start with Proverbs 21. It's very interesting. You'll again hear some of the Proverbs we've heard before repeated again and again. And like I've mentioned before, made for people who are learning, made for children, made for new believers into Judaism. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it wheresoever he will. The king has the authority, and he goes to the Lord with his authority. He is in charge of that. Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but the Lord ponders the hearts. We might think about, well, I want to do this and I want to do that, but he's the one that ponders what are your hearts, what's your motivation. In other places, it's called the reins of your heart. Going through some of these, it is better to dwell in the corner of a rooftop than with a brawling woman and in a wide house. Again, if there's contention there, please be aware that it's better to be in the corner of a house top. The idea, if you're upstairs and you're in the corner, it's better than being with a brawling woman in a wide house. The soul of a wicked desires evil; his neighbor findeth no favor in his eyes. Once you desire evil, everybody's your enemy. You know, the neighbor findeth no favor. You have no favor with your neighbors. When the scorner is punished, the simple receive wisdom, and the wise is instructed, he receives knowledge. So when the scorner is punished, the simple go, hey, I don't want to do that. A righteous man wisely considers the house of the wicked, but God overthrows the wicked for their wickedness. God will overthrow the wicked. That's why they're known as wicked. It is the joy to the just to do judgment, but destruction shall be to the workers of iniquity. We're told as Christians, don't judge, judge not lest you be judged. Well, it also says judge righteous judgment. But here, it is a joy to the just to do judgment. When we're judging whether something's right or wrong, when we're doing judgment on how things are supposed to be, then there is justice there. The discernment, that's what discernment is. This whole book is about judging whether something's good or whether something's bad, whether something's right or wrong. Whoever keepeth his tongue and his mouth keepeth his soul from troubles. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who deals in proud wrath. If you're proud and haughty, you're a scorner. You're someone who scorns things. And again, many of these are similar to what we've already seen, but read each one of them. Like I said, I really do like Proverbs, just because I'm not hitting every high point. Again, when you're gleaning, when you're going through this, sifting through it, pulling out your favorites and the ones that mean something to you, look at all of these. They're very good. I really do like Proverbs. Going back to First Chronicles, we find it interesting in Chronicles as we finished through chapter 9. Again, going back 1 through 9, 1 through 8 deal basically with the genealogy of man, worldwide and then regional. Then we break down to the Davidic line. Then we talked about each one of the 12 tribes and their names, their chiefs, their connection to Levi. And then we can connect Levi back to Adam. So we connect Levi to Adam. You connect yourself to Levi. You're connecting yourself all the way back to Adam. So we see this going. He's connecting all the 12 tribes. And again, he talks about the genealogy was reckoned. In 9, it says, we have the reckonings of genealogies that were written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. So again, it's static. It's set when you get the kings. Now, in 9, he goes and connects the dots from those who came back from Babylon. So you can see this mighty connection here. Again, with people, and again, I've said this, with where we have the geography. You're here. Simeon's down here. Reuben is over here. Gad is up here. Manasseh's over here. Dan, you're up here. So people will know where their places are. It's interesting, we begin with chapter 10. 10 begins the narrative, but interesting, 10 begins at 1 Samuel 31. It begins with the death of Saul and his son Jonathan. We skip all the way to the end of 1 Samuel. We don't talk anything about Samuel. We haven't talked about David and Goliath. We haven't talked about the problems with the kingdom, with Saul, not obeying God. We've kind of skipped past this because the chronicler, is trying to get to Jerusalem. This is more about Jerusalem. We will find that in the next coming chapters, We're dealing with the end of 1 Samuel. We talk about Samuel 31. We go back to 27 for a little bit of history. Then we move on. In 13, we jump all the way to 2 Samuel chapters 5 and 6. And the rest of 1st and 2nd Chronicles deal with that time after that. We look at 10. We're talking about when the Philistines came about and they slew Saul and Jonathan, and there was that battle that was sore. And we're talking about how Saul called upon his armor bearer to slay him, but the man would not, so he fell on his own sword, and then his armor bearer killed himself. The men came and found the bodies of Saul, the Philistines did, found the bodies of Saul and his sons. They dishonored them and spread them out, and this was a very dishonorable thing that happened to the king of Israel at that time. Then the men of Jabesh Gilead, if you remember them, they went at night, they went in secret and took the body of Saul. It says these were valiant men who took away the bodies of Saul and the bodies of his sons and brought them to Jabesh, and they buried them there. They burned them and buried them, and they fasted for 7 days. And he died because of his sins, but he also died because he approached a familiar spirit. So this happened. His household was taken care of. Now the line in Benjamin moves on, but Saul stops right here, at least in a kingly sort of way. We also have in chapter 11, we have that all the men come to David and say that they want him to be his king. He says that we are blood of my blood and we are flesh and bone of you. We're not getting kingdom from Benjamin now. We're getting kingdom from Judah. And Judah is the lawgiver. We have that was when when Jacob, getting the right person, blessed his sons. He called Judah the lawgiver. So here now in Judah will the king come out, and that king will be David. And we're talking about when David went and the Israel gets together after the death of Saul in chapter 11 here and makes him king. So we're setting up, again, we're not doing history per se to grab the nuts and bolts, you know, the little things, where they're moving fairly quickly. It actually goes to when it says he was made king in verses 1 through 4. In 5, it says he goes over the castle of Zion, which is the city of David. He goes to Jabesh, which was Jerusalem before it was named Jerusalem. He goes there, conquers them, and he calls it the city of David, and he moves into Jerusalem. This is the beginning of this spiritual capital of Jerusalem. This is the beginning of where God puts his name. So he puts his name here, and he goes, and of course he offers, if he smites this, the man who smites it will be first and captain. So Joab, the son of Zerubbabel, goes up, and this is how Joab, his remember, this is his nephew, became the captain by helping him take Jerusalem from the Jebusites. So that gets established. He goes greater and greater. He draws all the military men. And what I love is for the rest of 11, we are talking about his mighty men. It's interesting. We cover history just in 4 or 5 verses, but then we spend the rest of it talking about these wonderful men, these mighty men. We talked about them before in 1 Samuel. But here we are talking about him again. We talk about the first one, Jehoshabim. He was the leader. He was the captain. He lifted up a spear against 300 men. So he was a mighty man. Then we have Eleazar, son of Dodo. And he went with David. And he fought in a barley field. Remember, we talked about being in the lentil field. The one who was in the lentil field who fought and beat out the Philistines in this very sloppy, very wet, very slippery place. And yet here we have him mentioned. And it talks about how the Lord saved them. Even being valiant, they didn't claim the victory for themselves. They claimed that it was from the Lord. And these three, we have the other one was named Abishai. Remember, this is Joab's brother. Joab had another brother, Amasa. And so Abishai was here, and he was one of the three. He was one of the chief three. Again, talking about these wonderful, mighty men and what they did. And how he even tells the story of later on when David was down with these men and just said in passing, "Oh, how I'd long to have water from Bethlehem." And these men risked their lives going through garrisons and through the Philistines to grab this water from Bethlehem, then fought their way back. And of course, David took it and realized that these men had risked their lives just to get him water. And he pours it out as an offering unto the Lord, if you remember that story. That's recounted here. Again, we're giving these guys glory because they were valiant and they were strong. We go through them. Abishai, that he took a spear against 300 and he slew them, and he was very honorable. We mentioned Benaniah. He's my boy. He's the one who's David's, he didn't make the top 3, but he was David's personal guard. I mean, like I said, if Benaniah is watching over you, you're sleeping like a baby. He did some wonderful things. He slew 2 lion-like men in Moab, and he went and slew a lion in the pit on a snowy day. Remember, we talked about that. He slew an Egyptian who was 5 cubits. That guy was almost 9 foot tall with a big weaver's beam as a staff, he took as a spear, and he took and killed this giant. We talk about him. We talk about the things Benaniah did, and he was named among, he didn't make it among the 3, but he was still a mighty man. And we have honorable men mentioned here, and for the rest of the chapter, we're talking about these wonderful men. They list them by name, each one of them valiant. We don't know their stories, but we know if they're mentioned, they were mighty men. We do see Uriah here. And again, I mentioned that the greatest tragedy of Uriah, that when David decided to seduce Bathsheba and then she got her pregnant, she was Uriah's wife. And this was not just some man living next door. He actually planned the murder of one of his mighty men. And that makes it even more astounding. It's even more poignant. It's even more sad that he would go. But because of his sin, it had been him or Uriah, because it was a sin for him to do what he did. He sinned against God and against the Torah, the law of God, when he took another man's wife. And he kills Uriah, but Nathan finds out about it. But instead of him dying, God decides that the son would die. And you remember the story, how the baby became ill, and David mourned and fasted for the baby. But then the baby died, and he decides, well, he cleans up and goes that he won't come to me, but one day I'll go to him. You remember those stories. Again, in Chronicles, we're not hitting a lot of these stories. We're mentioning them in passing. Here we are 11 chapters in, and we're almost, we're finishing up with 1 Samuel, moving on into 2 Samuel, and then we'll move into Kings here, just covering that land. The goal is Jerusalem. The goal is Zion. That's the goal here. So we're here talking about these wonderful mighty men all the way through 47. He picks up in 12 talking about when David went to Ziklag, and I commented that is equivalent to 1 Samuel 27. And again, the death of Saul was in 1 Samuel 31. So we're in the same zone. When we talk about where he went to Ziklag, if you remember, that he was on the run from Saul, and he was given the city of Ziklag by the Philistines when he went to be with them for a while. He was given the city in Judah. And so he takes the city, and he's there. And of course, you remember at one time his family was taken from Ziklag, and he pursued the Lord, prayed to the Lord, and the Lord went and brought all of that family back, if you remember that story. His men wanted to turn against him, but God gave him the victory over the enemies that had stolen his family. He didn't lose a thing in that. God preserved everything of his, if you remember that story. You'd have to go back to 1 Samuel 27. Once again, Chronicles is not going deep into the story. It tells about the story, but mostly, here we are in 2. We start talking about mighty men. He had men with him that could use bows and could use right hand and left hand. They could hurl stones and shoot arrows. And they were from the tribe of Benjamin. He's going in now in 12 and mentioning almost from every tribe. In fact, I can't find a tribe that's not mentioned, were hundreds, if not thousands, of valiant men. These weren't just a refuge. These just weren't the poor. These just weren't the hurting. These were mighty men who wanted to stand for the cause of God at that time. Valiant men were appearing because this man of God, David, lifted up. These men were just coming to him. Here's all these mighty men from Benjamin. It gives their chief, talks about him and all the different ones. Mighty men that were over men, had men under them. We see the Gadites were here. They separated themselves unto David, and these were men of war fit for battle. They could handle the shield and the buckler, and their faces were like the faces of lions, and they were swift as roes in the mountains. These were fighting men. These were fierce men. These were agile men. And he goes through them and talks about them. And David meets with these guys, and especially with the Benjamites, to say, do you come in peace? If you come in peace, you can join me, but if you want to betray me, this will not happen. He's very strong with them. We mentioned where men came from Manasseh, that men came to Ziklag at that time from Manasseh. These were mighty men of valor, and they came to help David, and there was a great host, like the host of God. These men just appeared by the thousands. It wasn't 1, 2, 3, or 5 or 20. We're having thousands of men reaching up. And the numbers of these bands were ready and armed for battle came to David in Hebron. And the children of Judah were there, 6,800. You have Simeon was here with 7,100. Levi had 4,600. And we had their name there. You have Zadok, which would be Zadok the priest. He was one of their mighty men. We had, of course, Benjamin mentioned. Ephraim had 20,800. There's a lot of men from Ephraim. The other half of Manasseh, you remember, that's up on the east side, they came down. So did Gad. We had Zebulun mentioned. Naphtali mentions here what they have captains. The Danites appear, and a lot of times you'll see it says things like experts at war. Experts at war. These were not, like I said, just average shepherds and carpenters and just, day laborers. People that were expert, people who had fought in war and knew what was like. Asher came forth from battle. There was also the Reubenites and the Gadites, and all of those on the east side came across the river. They even came across the river when it was flooding, risking their own lives to come and be a part of this. And so here they were, and when they all got there, it says, and they were there 3 days, eating and drinking, for their brothers had prepared for them. This was not animosity. Their brothers saw that they were coming and created more resources, brought in more food, brought in more of what they would need. It says, moreover, they that were nigh to them, even unto Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali, brought bread and asses on camels, and on mules, and on oxen, meat, meal, cakes, figs, raisins, wine, oil, oxen, and sheep abundantly. And here's what they're saying. When they talk about Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali, they're saying men that lived far away, men that lived, 60, 70 miles away, were bringing all this stuff down. So again, this is wonderful things that's happening here. The Chronicles is, again, lifting up people. It's lifting up Jerusalem. It's lifting up mighty men. I think that when we're when we're done with this, we'll see that there will be a connection. When Jesus comes back, and there's 144,000 in Israel, these will not be men standing around staring in the sky like a bunch of, just a bunch of theologians. These will be men of war ready to battle with their king. That's the parallel here. So we see all these men coming. Again, in this history that we looked at from 10, 11, and 12, we're not giving a lot of stories like we were in Samuel, in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. We're kind of skipping that as if you already know it. And again, pretend that you've just come back with Zerubbabel, or you've been back in the land for 10 years, and now you're reading this, and now you've got new word that isn't different, that tells you the story real quick, but tells you about might and valor. What do you think they're trying to say when might and valor are brought up so quickly in this book? The answer is, you're going to need might and valor. This is what we need today in the church, is we need might and we need valor. It's very important. Very good book. Very good parts here. I'm really liking this. Thank you.